Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Water Trio Astrology Podcast. I'm here today with my dear friends and colleagues, Alicia and Cassandra, and we are going to share a few thoughts about the astrological highlights of January and February 2024. Welcome back, gals.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
No, it's so
Nice
good
to
to
be
be here. As we're getting started, we want to make sure that you know about our Water Trio Astrology Retreat, which is happening in Sydney on January 13th and 14th, 2024. You can sign up via Alicia's website, aliciayousuf.com, and we will be doing all kinds of things about timing for astrology in 2024. So transits and perfections, and I think some progressions. So I'm looking forward to seeing you girls in person.
It's going to be so good.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. So I think we have just a few spots left. So if you're listening to this and it's late December or early January and you want to come join us for a couple of insightful, uplifting days together in Sydney, we hope to see you there. So with that said, let's get into the astrology. I don't know about you two, but I'm actually really looking forward to the astrology of January. There's some really lovely trine and sextile aspects. And my general sense of the astrology of January is that things get better as the month goes on. Planets are either picking up speed, going forward instead of going backwards, and starting to move through signs that are just much more effective. So what do you guys have your eyes on for January in terms of your sense of the astrology?
Well, I think there's just really one thing to talk about in January, but no, you're right, Kel. There's a lot of, trines and sextiles, Mercury stationing at the top of the month. It's a nice, if you're making those New Year's resolutions or you're trying to, plan, logistically or get organized, it's a nice sort of start to the year, not just the month. And then having Mars come through into Capricorn, it's very much like, okay, let's put those plans into action. Let's kind of get onwards and upwards with whatever those goals are. So it is a really kind of productive and efficient onwards and upwards energy to the year. And because we are talking about the months of January and February, the two consecutive Saturn seasons, and having Saturn starting to pick up the pace, it starts at 3, ends at 9. That's nearly the same distance it did all through 2023. And then in addition to that, we now have Jupiter, Saturn's ruler, stationed direct at the very end of 2023. So it really does feel like the steam engines have been filled, the train's going to leave the station, and we're really starting to get that speed and momentum. So I think it can be very productive, very efficient, but very quick as well. Alicia, how about you? What do you think about the energy of this year or this month?
I agree with everything you said. I'm really looking forward to that Mars and Capricorn energy. I love the energy you just used for the steam engine. That's what I see. It's this flying piece of iron on a track. It likes to go in a certain direction, but I just think after everything that Mars has been through, this year especially, but especially the last few months, it'll be nice to have that kind of energy there to help us go forward, go after what we want, really focus on those goals. It's that kind of kick, that rocket booster towards our goal setting and, starting to achieve whatever New Year's resolutions that you're putting in place. It can be like, okay, these are the goals and these are the actions I'm going to put in place and really get going with them.
One other point on Mars, it's now visible. So it is not only Mars with essential dignity exalted in Capricorn, but it's now visible. So it can do stuff. So that is, hold on to your hats. We're going to be doing some stuff this month.
Yeah, and it's going to become visible as the morning star version of itself, the morning Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that combination of Mars coming into the sign of its exaltation, January 4th, January 5th, and then becoming visible again. There's this effectiveness and this improvement of function, if you like, to do with Mars. And I just think that is going to give a real sense of sort of steady application of effort towards substantial goals or undertakings. Between that and the third Mercury trine Jupiter aspect that happens, you know, kind of around the middle of the month, I just really feel like they're great energies to have in January, where you're trying to figure things out, get things going, make things happen. One of the things I'm thinking about with Mars in Capricorn is this idea of managing time and energy effectively, so that we're applying our efforts to things that are of value or have long-term offerings, if you like. So there's something there about like figuring out your schedule, figuring out what to do, what not to do. But I think it sounds like all of us are just really so excited for this Mars in Capricorn piece coming through for January.
Especially considering this year started with the Mars retrograde, you know, so it's like this is
Very
and the year before
difference.
Venus retrograde, you know, with Pluto. So it's this sense that this is actually the first year in a while that we've really got this ability to go forward, you know, really think, okay, this is where the year starts. Whereas, you know, the last few years it's been like February or March. It's really felt like we can kick into things. So
yeah, and just having Mars in a slower paced sign compared to Sagittarius. It's funny we're talking about this because this morning I was listening to a YouTube video talking about some Kabbalic principles of time, and a lot of it was about being in the moment. You know, that sort of slowed down, measured, not being kind of dispersed in the energy, and just staying very sort of grounded and in the moment. And I think that can be a very Mars in Capricorn thing as well, you know, rather than the sort of scattered wildfire energy coming out of Sagittarius. So yeah,
Mars in Capricorn feels like a more steady, intentional build towards something, whereas Mars in Sag, which was like late November, December, and early January, it's like wild horses, or it's a very sort of primal energy that is got an impulsive, spontaneous quality, and definitely, you know, doing kind of so many things at once that there's activity but not actually momentum or progress. Whereas I think Mars in Capricorn is very much about, you know, making sure that if you're doing something, it's creating progress or momentum. It's helping you get somewhere, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of you know, do something for yourself today that the future self will thank you for, I think is a big message of Mars in Cap.
Yeah. Like you like to say, Cass, this is a Mars that will look to the long term and take the short term pain for it. So you know, it kind of reduces that recklessness or that impulsivity of Mars tends to have. I mean, it is an earth sign, it's the fastest of the earth signs, but it's definitely got that kind of get it on the right track and you can keep going full steam ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, no holds barred approach to January, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and Mars gets such great support from Jupiter and Saturn throughout the month of January, just by sign-based and degree-based aspect, that it really feels, you know, the Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are those three superior planets that do speak to more meaningful or substantive topics. So you're not just kind of getting started and dealing with day-to-day, week-to-week things. It's more about putting in place the changes for longer term plans, like, you know, the future you, the thing that the you of 2 years from now is going to be so grateful that you got started. It's that kind of thing. Between Jupiter, I think Cassie was saying Jupiter had gestation direct at the end of December. Jupiter rules Saturn rules Mars. You know, between those planets now getting going, it really feels like we're underway with the next chapter, the plans for the next phase, essentially. And then, of course, the big astrological news for January. Who would like to get us going?
Well,
on that topic?
I guess before that happens, though, we do have the last conjunction between the Sun and Pluto in Capricorn.
Sure.
And I think, Leisha, you pointed out that it was 50, like 29 and 59. So yeah. So it is very much the last hurrah as far as Cap's concerned. I mean, obviously Pluto goes back into Capricorn for a brief period, but I think just the fact that this Sun conjunction really happens at that very edge of all of this is significant before we have that re-entry into Aquarius.
And what do you think is significant about that, Cass? Is it sort of that signature of like that longer Pluto and Capricorn cycle winding down?
One might like to hope. We did sort of say in the pre-chat before recording was it's a bit like the Empire Strikes Back, just before we're into this Aquarius vibe. There's just that sort of one last renewal of Pluto under that Capricornian energy. That being said, you could really split hairs. It's so on the edge of that. So, I mean, I think it's going to be significant for people on a personal level if you do have a planet, particularly at 29 or even 0 Aquarius. And I think for those people, that's what you're really, want to tap into. So I think that's about the 20th. Is that right, Kel, as far as dates?
The Sun-Pluto conjunction? Yeah, I think it's the 20th, maybe the 21st in Australia.
Yeah.
And it's just a couple of hours before the Sun goes into Aquarius. And then I think, Leisha was saying it's how many hours before like Pluto goes into Aquarius?
15 minutes before the Sun moves into Aquarius. And then, it's about 10 or 11 hours until then Pluto moves in. So this all happens here in Australia. It's the 20th, 21st. The rest of the world, the 20th. So it's a really significant shift that day. And we'll see more of it into the astrology of February. We'll get to this as the personal planets, come and touch all of this. But it's such an interesting straddle, they are both Saturn-based signs, the two of these. And my sense of the difference between Pluto and Capricorn and the Pluto and Aquarius is Pluto and Capricorn, it's what you do. Whereas in Pluto and Aquarius is like the reasons why you do it, the thinking behind what you're doing. And it's almost like this is going to be that difference of as we meet that. And I think the Sun will really highlight this as that shift happens. So it's like, what's the thinking behind what you're digging up or what you're trying to get into or what you're trying to understand about yourself as Pluto starts to highlight these degrees. And we haven't seen Pluto in a fixed sign for, at this area of the chart, this is where Pluto starts to dig in, where it starts to stay in signs for a lot longer because it goes pretty quickly between Virgo and Capricorn. Whereas this sign of sky, like how long's it been in Capricorn for?
I think it's 15 years. Yeah, in Capricorn, but it's like 20 in Aquarius, isn't it?
Aquarius, So it's something that's really got a lot more staying power. Like I was thinking for me, this is going to be probably the rest of my professional life, having Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah.
So really thinking about those life stages for all of us about what this Pluto and Aquarius will mean. It's a whole era of our lives. Because it does, and it's like it's getting into the deeper part of the pool. It's like earlier this year it was dipping its toes in, but now it's like, okay, I'm in the shallow end, getting deeper, and it'll pop back out, September through until November. But I think it's just a kind of a coming up for air.
Yeah, it's definitely more of an immersion this time around. And I think, we can kind of really say sayonara to the Capricorn part of our life, especially with that Pluto Sun conjunction just before it all moves into Aquarius. And then, we're definitely sort of saying goodbye at one level to a topic of our life, and then welcoming a new one. And how is our life or our lives, according to our Aquarius house, how are they going to profoundly shift over the next 20 years? And thinking about that, and are you even picking up on flavors and themes of that now? Are you getting those inklings or those deeper shifts, all that sort of Pluto underground stuff, that something is profoundly shifting in a particular area of your life? And then as we move into January and February, that is potentially going to become a lot more apparent. Especially it's an ingress. You may not have any Aquarius planets until well into the sign, or Pluto's not going to make aspects until it's, halfway through, what have you. But there's something very potent about the ingress. It's like an introduction. Pluto's going, here I am, like it or not. You're going to have to deal with me for 20 years. And then, what is that going to look like? What does it touch in your chart? What does it not touch in your chart? And that's going to give you a really, sort of that profound experience. So that's sort of like letting go of a massive chapter and welcoming in a new one. So for some of us, that's going to be exciting, while for others, it's going to be a little bit, oh, do I really have to go through this? So it's certainly going to be different for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it is such, I think that's a really great way of thinking about it. Like, it is such an epoch type cycle. Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. So that sort of entire timeline, like sort of 15, 16 years, we've all had whatever Pluto in Capricorn journey, whatever house Capricorn is for you. But also, if you've got planets in the cardinal signs, in Aries, Libra, Cancer, or Capricorn, this last 15 years with Pluto in Capricorn has probably been really pivotal in some ways for you for those particular planets. And then as Pluto comes into Aquarius, as we were saying, January 20th or 21st, we're really starting to get further into the Pluto in a fixed sign. So not just Aquarius placements, but if you've got planets in Taurus and Leo and Scorpio, this next 20 years is going to be incredibly transformative and in some ways regenerative, but in other ways about that death rebirth process of releasing one thing so that you can kind of incarnate into something totally different.
Are you girls excited for it?
I've got a stellium in early Scorpio, so
Yeah, Leisha and I both have really early fixed sign placements, so we're like so in it personally, I guess. I mean, I also think some of those collective Pluto and Aquarius themes about technology and about the ethics about emerging and innovative technologies, that's going to be a huge part of the conversation, late January and heading into February, as Pluto is now back in Aquarius for another chunk of time.
Yeah.
Because we especially saw those themes already arise this year, around AI and ethics around AI, for example. Another thing, a theme that I think we'll see is power to the people. The idea of Pluto in this humanitarian sign. So it'll be interesting to see the balances of power and how that's highlighted in that January, February period as well. So yeah.
Yeah, Aquarius is the sign opposite Leo. So it's like the anti figurehead, in Aquarius, it's
like anti-boomer, you mean?
Well, I don't know if I'd say it specifically like that. That's not what I was thinking per se. But, like Leo is the sign.
Speaking.
I mean, the boomer generation has Pluto in Leo. So, of course, this is like an opposition transit to their natal Pluto. But I was more thinking about Aquarius as the sign where the sun is in detriment. So the idea of like Aquarius does not uphold individual leaders. It is more about the shared collaborative collective experience. And so whether that's community oriented, whether that is, just being aware that there's more than the one individual, or that, and I think back to a lot of the work we were all talking about as we were coming into the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, and the idea that air signs are about dispersal of things, dispersal of central power, central figureheads or sources of power, dispersal of like people all being congregated in cities, that idea of moving to regional areas, or even just the dispersal and sometimes the displacement of different peoples through migration and immigration and refugee status, around the world. Like Pluto coming into Aquarius as an air sign, there's more mobility and movement. Things are shifting, dispersing, whether it's equalizing, but it's definitely moving away from that kind of solar centrality energy, because Aquarius is opposite that type of thing.
Yeah, so a lot of sort of the energy that we've grown up with, in our vintage, a lot of what the collective has had imposed on us or shone upon us through the Pluto in Leo cycle, we're diametrically opposed that now. So, as you said, to reiterate your points, like, it is that dispersal of energy. We're not having maybe centralized governments or centralized institutions. It's all sort of, in that process of kind of breaking down. And so, when that all sounds nice, but Pluto is destructive before it regenerates, and so the destroying or the destructive element of what's come before it is not a pleasant thing. So but I guess over the next 20 years we're sort of going into the rebuild, but it might just be a little bit not so ideal on the get-go. So it might take a few years for these sort of new structures or new ideas or new innovations to sort of really take a hold. And whether that is kind of forced upon us, Aquarius is a fixed sign after all. There could also be just a little bit of difficulty around that as well.
Yeah. And I think it'll be, adding into this dispersal of resources as well. If we think about the world right now, just resources are held specifically in certain areas, and, this possibility that food, wealth, all of that can be dispersed more evenly around the planet is a possibility. And I think when we come back as well to individuals or people, I find Aquarius is, Leo is very much about me and here and who I am, and, how I love to dance around my lounge room, when I'm at home by myself. Whereas Aquarius is like, okay, how am I expressing me out there in the world? What does my own individual identity look like when I'm mixing with other people? And I wonder if this is going to be an age in which we feel more empowered to be ourselves more, rather than upholding the kind of social traditions or the social expectations that Capricorn may ask us to do. So I don't know whether there'll be a sense in personal development fields or mental health fields for this as well, of like there being more freedom of empowerment within each person as well to be who they want to be, fly that freak flag, as Aquarius likes to do.
Yeah, well,
So
I guess we're going to have
shifts.
20 years to talk about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess, if we're thinking about January, we've talked about the Pluto coming in to Aquarius, which is definitely like the top level event, but we've also talked about Mars in Capricorn and some of the other aspects and interactions there. Is there anything that either of you want to say about January that we haven't touched on before we go full force into February?
Well, there's lots to say, but I think we've hit the highlights.
Okay, cool. So if we start then looking into February, there's a few different things going on there as well, but it does feel a bit like more on the Pluto in Aquarius story because we have Mercury will conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, and then we have Mars conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, and then we have Venus conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, like all through the middle part of February. How are each of you thinking about that as maybe an omen or themes that might come forward?
Well, I know in client work, we reflect a lot on the sort of March to June period of 2023 where Pluto went in. And unless somebody's got, really up close and personal stuff, early Aquarius, we've seen some things collectively which are, very apparent. But I think we had a lot of Aquarius before Pluto. So it hasn't been a massive shock. We had the grand conjunction December, Saturn, Jupiter. So now it's kind of the grand finale. But in February, this is an up close and personal taste of, how might it inform communications, logistics, planning, internet when Mercury gets there? How might it affect things to do with, action, drive, confidence, assertion, even topics, of conflict once Mars hits Pluto? And then, of course, how might that inform our relationships, our bonds that we share with other people, our friendships, our relationships? And when everything is changing, is that changing maybe what you desire or what you value or what you want to attract into your life? So, when we have this very deep sort of tectonic shift happening, not only Pluto in a new sign, because, you know, that's not, it's irregular, but we've all lived through them before. But what's really unique collectively is it's also an epoch shift. You know, it's air. And now as these smaller planets, well, not smaller, but the more faster moving planets move through this, we really get to see at a more personal level as well, what it might mean, you know, for us as individuals, and how it might, the dance of the inner planets interplay with the longer 20-year cycle as per this house. Because chances are a good majority of us are going to have a Mercury perfection year, a Mars perfection year, a Venus perfection year. So now our planets via perfection, even if it doesn't affect you by transit, by perfection, we're going to get smacked by this. A good majority of us, perhaps, unless you're in a Jupiter, Saturn, or a Sun and Moon year.
Yeah, it's such a concentration of planetary energies emphasizing, you know, that one sign and that one planet, that one thing. It's like
all at 0 degrees too.
Yes, exactly. 0 Aquarius is like the hot degree in February. And I'm thinking about it as like, you know, Mercury with Pluto, and then Mars with Pluto, and then Venus with Pluto. Each of those personal planets is like introducing just a different facet of the Pluto in Aquarius journey or experience. You know, I always think about, you know, Mercury with Pluto, or Mercury with a planet is like giving that planet a megaphone. So I always get very curious, like if Mercury's conjunct an outer planet, you know, what are the news headlines? What are the, you know, research pieces that are coming out around that time? What are the topics of conversation with friends and with family, colleagues, romantic partners? You know, what is it that Mercury is bringing forward out of the depths into our language, kind of intellectual awareness from Pluto in Aquarius? So I think February is a really helpful month if you're trying to get a sense of some of the topics or themes that are very relevant to Pluto in Aquarius for you personally, to sort of pay attention to the things that come up for you as these planets interact with Pluto in Aquarius. What about you, Leash, though? What is your sort of sense of these personal planets connecting with Pluto, or maybe you're thinking about February in a different way?
No, I'm totally agreeing with what both you're saying. And, you know, I always love that megaphone analogy with Mercury conjunct anything. And yeah, I think, you know, so that's happening on the 5th of February for everyone in the world. On the 14th, Mars will conjunct Pluto. So that will make for an interesting Valentine's Day for anyone celebrating. I think that may be where, you know, Pluto, I always think about as Hades, you know, the god of the underworld. And it's like we're being taken into a different underworld now. And Mars is going to be like, okay, I'm taking you, you're going there, it doesn't matter. And it may be this sense of some kind of conflict, internal conflict within yourself that is going to be highlighted over the next 20 years, some kind of irritation or frustration there. And it's that activating or that energizing of this deep Plutonian energy of like the cathartic release that needs to happen in this area of your chart. You know, Mars is kind of plunging the heat into this to encourage that purification. It's something that I see with Pluto and, well, all the air signs. It's something I notice here. Air is hot and air is moist. And here in the tropics, you know, it's humid. And I notice how quickly things corrupt or go to mold or putrefy. And it makes me think, okay, well, what is it that the corruption that's being pulled back, you know, within ourselves? Where are the places that we may not be living up to our own standards, or we may not be doing what we need to do? And I think Mars is going to highlight this for you. Okay, you know, where are your will haves and won't haves? Where are your morals and ethics? And where's the corruption that you need to kind of purify out of that? And yeah, and the Venus piece that's happening on the 17th of February for most of the world as well. You know, that's just highlighting exactly like Cass said, you know, our relationships and where we may need to dig deep to get into the itchy spaces, but in a totally new area of our chart. So I love Venus's ability to calm and cool and soothe here. So maybe whatever Mars created a niche or a heat with, Venus can come in with the cold compress to go, it's okay, we've got this, we can do this together.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely has that kind of collaborative quality. I guess I'm really curious about the Mars Pluto piece and how, we think about like if Mercury's giving something a megaphone, I always think, well, Mars is giving it like a weapon or some sharp sort of implement. And, Mars Pluto, that combustible, kind of volatile, but also willing to fight, to go into battle. And I do wonder about that Mars Pluto, like a war of words, a war of ideas, like the challenges or problems around technology, but also about the challenges and problems around maybe cohabitation or coexisting when there are people or groups of people that have different ideas, that have to kind of be in proximity. I think a lot about that with the Mars Pluto Aquarius piece, and how do we navigate those differences when there may be really big different power dynamics, essentially.
Yeah, this early part of Pluto is very different from the early iteration of Pluto, because I think from memory, all we got was a square from Mercury to Pluto. As Pluto ingressed into Aquarius last year, we didn't have this kind of continual hit of outer planets because Pluto didn't come until late March. So we sort of missed the Aquarius season. And the first aspect that that Pluto received from memory was the square from Taurus, Mercury and Taurus. And this time we get the conjunction. So there's definitely Mercury Pluto signatures, at least with these two ingresses. I can't remember what happened in March
of 2023. Yeah.
But I mean, I think, yeah, exactly. But I think, it's suffice to say that it's things to do with internet and technology is topics to be controlled at the moment, or the attempts to control information, attempts to control how people think, what we're allowed to think, what we're allowed to say. That's, I think, is going to be issues that we're going to be dealing with right up in our faces in 2024.
Yeah, it feels a lot about like the control, management, privacy to do with data and information online. Like I know that's been a thing for a while, but it's like now that there's a lot more happening with technology, just feels like some of that. And then also about like, I don't know how much people have like read about this or looked into it, there's a lot of platforms like social media platforms and other places online that are just designed to capture your attention from like, we want your eyeballs, for marketing or data collection purposes. So I think one of the things that I'm really thinking a lot about in regards to the whole longer Pluto in Aquarius transit is this idea of managing my attention. Where do I literally put my eyeballs? Am I looking at a screen? Am I scrolling on social? Am I reading a book? Am I looking at trees? Like, what is it that we're putting our attention or our mental focus towards? Because I think, the ways in which algorithms and things like that kind of try to manipulate our attention to keep it in certain places or to put certain things in front of us, not to like go down conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but the idea that we have to kind of it's a bit of a user beware space that I think is becoming increasingly important. And that's going to be a big part, of Pluto and Aquarius. So I'm really intrigued to hear about like research and data and information that comes out about how to create like a sustainable way of interacting with online spaces rather than sort of doing it in this unconscious way.
Yeah, I don't think it's a conspiracy to ask the questions, particularly when it's so obvious now. Like I remember 5 years ago, if I would have a conversation, I remember having a conversation about BMWs, and then all of a sudden in my Instagram, like BMW ads would pop up, and we might sort of write that off as a coincidence at one point in time, but I think it's quite clear that we know that it isn't. And so that's a good thing, because then we can actually, as you said, Kel, put in more awareness of where we do put our attention and know that, we are in a matrix, and, we all are, whether we want to admit it or not, but how we feed the beast, how we feed the machine is still up to us. How much do we, it's like a poker machine, it's the same thing, right? How much do you want to feed that thing? So I think the awareness of it is really key moving forward, because I don't know, I know even myself, my eyesight is just deteriorating so much just because of the amount of screen time I do get, because I don't have a choice in some respects, but then just all their incidental screen time that I don't actually need to be having.
Yeah.
Actually, that's interesting because eyeglasses were invented under the last Pluto Aquarius. So that's something.
Yes, as
it's
well as
inviting us to see more.
Yes,
as well as
exactly.
things like space travel, you know, because we had like the hot air balloons. Not that I think they were necessarily invented then, but there was this popularization or increased widespread use. So yeah, I like, and even, you know, with space exploration or space developments, I think what I'm really intrigued about is how much of like a foreshadowing of what the longer Pluto in Aquarius is going to be about do we start to get a sense of, particularly in February, as these quicker planets interact with Pluto.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, just to everything you're talking about the commodification of human attention also links back to mental health, which I think will be a huge thing under an Aquarius as well. And what neuroscience is showing is we're actually reaching the edge of our evolutionary capacity to deal with what our technology is trying to get us to do. You know, our brain literally can't keep up with it. So, you know, they're linking this to ADD, ADHD, you know, the uptick in people being diagnosed with that. And the actual trauma, the neuro level that we're seeing happen as well, just by that constant need to be connecting at this interface we're being taught to do. Do you guys ever watch Black Mirror?
No.
There's an interesting Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but it's on my to-do list when I stop scrolling Instagram.
Yeah. So this is definitely a big theme for February, the Pluto Aquarius activations. Is there anything else that either of you have got your eye on for February that you think is worth a mention?
Well,
there may not be, and that's okay.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure, like, before we wrap up, that we're not, that neither of you's got something burning that you want to say.
No, I think, you know, that, as you said, like, we have the ingress of Pluto in Aquarius January, but it's February we really get the next course, you know, the hors d'oeuvre plate gets passed around, and we'll really get to see what that looks like.
Leash, do you want to, is there any sort of final thoughts or ideas from you?
I just think be ready to walk with Hades, you know, be ready to kind of pull back the rug, start to explore underneath the surface, start to be aware of what empowerment means for you.
Love it. Yeah. Asking deeper, probing questions, I guess, being willing to examine things that you might have just taken at face value.
Yeah, and trying to keep ego in the room when you do it, or, you know, your mind, or whatever you want to call it. You know, just really be willing to peel it. What about you, Cal?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I was also just reviewing February. I'm like, there's, you know, Venus and Mars and Mercury will then also be in Aquarius throughout the month. Like Venus and Mars actually make a conjunction in Aquarius, and the planets in Aquarius are going to be squaring Jupiter in Taurus. Like there's just a lot of different iterate. And of course, February is the month where we have the sun in Aquarius for at least about half the time. So it just feels like if you want to get to know a little bit about what this longer Pluto in Aquarius trend will be for you, I would just be really alert to what comes up for you, whether it's something you start to get suspicious about, or something that you're starting to question, something that you want to understand more deeply, or something that you really want to change in a kind of substantial, maybe radical way. These are things that you don't have to do this February, but they're clues and pieces of information about things that you might get obsessed with, or that you might go deeper into over this next couple of decades with this Pluto in Aquarius piece.
Yeah. And of course, looking to which house this is going to highlight for you, because those will be the topics and themes that this will be happening again. So, yeah.
We're all about to have a masterclass in our Aquarius house, whether you realize you've registered for this, by choosing to be alive at this point in time.
I know, and that's what makes it so significant, because for some of us it's really significant, for others it's not, and Pluto just doesn't go everywhere in our birth charts in a lifetime. So there is something very, if you want to call it soul contract or what have you, that you've been put on this earth to do a Pluto journey only in a specific area of your chart. So, whatever house it activates is going to be a really important house to figure out.
Yeah. And I love, like, between what you just said then, Cass, and what you said earlier, Leash, you're thinking about like our age, and the next 20 years is basically this really substantial part of our careers, and how are we navigating that? Or, if you're in your 20s and you're thinking about getting your career started, or if you're at an stage where you're starting to do family planning and have kids, the next 20 years, whatever thing you're focused on is going to be influenced by doing it in the context of Pluto in Aquarius.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to say, Pluto in Scorpio, get ready. Ugly. Because us Pluto and Libras are like, sayonara, Pluto. Thank God to get that square out of my face.
Yeah. So Leisha's referencing a
Millennial
a
age
sort of an
group.
age or generational based transit where transiting Pluto makes a square to your natal Pluto. Can be in your late 30s, can be in your 40s. But with Pluto coming out of Capricorn, it's the square to, Libra, Pluto and Libra people, which is everyone born in the 70s for the most part, which is all of us. And so the next generation to get their Pluto square is going to be
and some
Pluto
early 80s.
There is early 80s, wasn't it?
We can't forget our early 80s friends. I think that goes as far as to 83, actually.
Yeah, thank you for making sure they don't get very
Gotta
inclusive of you, Pluto and Libra. So yeah, anyone born with that Pluto and Scorpio, we are more than ready to hand that baton over to you. And
That's what you want you to.
Well, it's kind of like, sorry, Leash, that was the internet glitch there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, I'm just saying, like, we're here to support you. We can give you, and I think because it's fixed signs as well, the Pluto in Leos, the Pluto in Scorpios, it just feels more heavy, more intense, Pluto in those signs. And it's, in a bit of the Pluto research that I've done, we've actually seen empires fall. They've all fallen during Pluto in fixed sign areas. So I wonder, for the Pluto in fixed sign generations, how, what are you going to be doing about your own personal empire, and how will the bricks come tumbling down?
Yeah, I mean, I know this doesn't quite include you, Leash, but I think those of the Uranus in Scorpio generation, like, we were the original weirdos. So, we're definitely qualified to help you. The original emos, exactly, right? I mean, I still am in some respects, but yeah, we can definitely help you find that inner weirdo to cope with your Pluto transits.
Yeah. I mean, there is, because Pluto in a fixed sign, it's the rigidity, the kind of solidness of the fixed signs. Like, there's no bending, there's no giving. It's
extra
just
intense.
It's either break, or like it's hold on till the death, or it breaks. So there is more. It's a different. Anyway, I feel like we have a million tangents. Very typical, talking about planets in air signs. We could probably go for another hour. What do each of you gals have coming up? I know we talked about our water trio event in January, but love to hear maybe from you first, Leash, if you've got anything coming up. Or do you want Cass to go first?
No, I don't. My 2024 astrology, I'm still working that out. I was supposed to do a webinar. I'm actually going to do an in-person event. I'm just finalizing with the venue here. So it's going to be here on the Sunshine Coast. So yeah, keep an eye on my social media for more details on that. And also, for those on the sunny coast, I have just found a venue to start doing ecotherapy from. So if you're keen to kind of, work with your nervous system, if you have a history of trauma or anxiety or even depression or loneliness, look me up. I'm going to be start working from the beautiful Geelong overlooking the coast, and guiding you in nature. What about you, Cass or Kel?
Someone has a Pluto transit coming in her 11th. All that group stuff. Nice.
Yeah.
Me, yes, in January, it'll be on my website. Just a 2024 year ahead webinar. Of course, there is the Golden Circle Club, which is my astrology membership, where all the good stuff happens. So monthly astrology each and every month. Kel.
Excellent. Yeah, like both of you, I've got a 2024 webinar coming up. It's an online thing for me. It is Saturday, January 6th, Sunday, January 7th in Australia. And in January, I will be co-teaching our Water Trio Retreat. All three of us will be there. And I'm also going to be teaching my in-person year ahead event in Palm Springs. So that is the end of January in Palm Springs in Southern California. So you can find out details about all those events and everything else that I've got coming up in 2024, which is a lot. Definitely going all in on the in-person next year on my calendar page on my website. So kellysastrology.com. Do you girls each want to give a shout out of your website just so to make it easy for people to find you?
AliciaYusuf.com.
And CassandraTyndall.com.
Easy.
Just our names.
There we go. Well, thank you, gals, for being together and doing this again. It's always so fun. We should let our listeners know, wherever you are listening to our podcast, can you like, subscribe, or follow along? It really helps other people find out about the show. And if you are watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments below what you're thinking about in terms of January and February astrology, or how you're experiencing some of the themes that we've been talking about. We love to hear how this hits for you in terms of your personal experiences. So thanks, gals, and thanks, everyone, and we'll see you all next time.
So good.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.